It's time for our next programming concept, which is on null. If you can close down any project files and have the project pane open at the side like me, for this, do this in Java. Yes, we've switched over to using Kotlin, but to explain this concept of null, we need to do this in Java. As in Java, and we're going to dog buttons. Well, if we scroll down to our dog class, we know our dog object will have a name, it will have some behavior, the bark. For now, you can think of the word exception and error synonymously. Okay, exception and error, a crash. So it all comes down to this thing here at the top where we declare the variable. So there's a few important things to know about this. When we talk about a variable, dog, my dog, that variable there, it's important to understand that that is not actually the dog object. The name button and the bark button, we don't actually have anything in the pot. So the remote control is pressing these buttons, and those buttons are controlling here until we have the dog. That space is empty. So let's comment these two lines out. So command slash control slash, and I'll put a comment just to the right of the first error. We'll put an arrow and I'll say, there will be no error in our code. Okay, so when we're developing, when we're writing the language, we won't see any red errors. We will think everything is fine. But this will throw an exception. Let me just close the project pane now. This will throw an exception, brackets, error, applied line. It works. I suppose we could do a system.out.print line and say the dog's name is space, and then we can add the mydog.name. So we can run this code now because now our remote control, our mydog remote control is pointing to something. The remote control buttons has something to act on. So let's run the code now. Woof woof, because of our bark method and the dog's name is Fluffy. So no problem. But in Java, yes, we can assign our variable as here. Okay, or we can talk in null string on a string object on a string variable like this. So let's try and do two uppercase on our string, even though it's null. So semicolon. So what do you expect will happen here? Exception in the fed at line 21. Where's line 21? It is here. Null pointer exception. Okay, so we'll just put here, we can't call a method on our null string. Now, it's worth pointing out that while pretty much most variables, most objects can be null, there are a small number of types of variables in Java which cannot be null. They always have a default value. And we've actually seen some of these before. If I just scroll to the top, and then underneath the null string, I put a line break, and we'll say primitive data types cannot be null. They always have a default value. We've seen some of these primitive types before, e.g. int, double, float, boolean, etc. Okay, pretty much in Java, any of these variables that start with a lowercase letter. So let's make a primitive variable now just to show you what I mean by this. So if I do static lowercase I int and do my int variable and then semicolon, you might think initially that that would be null like everything else. But these primitive symbol types, they always have a default value. So if I scroll down now and try and do system.out.println and then put my int variable, rather than seeing null, we will see 0. Okay, so as it turns out, an int variable defaults to 0. Okay, a boolean variable defaults to false. And if you type Java primitive data types, you'll see the fairly small list of these types of variable. We've seen most of them, okay, and it will tell you what all their default values are. For all of the number types, it's pretty much some variation of 0, 0.0, 0.0f for float. Okay, so null, when a variable container, when a pot in memory is empty. And I have just seen that I spelled initial wrong. Apologies if you've seen this all video long, it's annoyed you. There we go. Do make sure to rename this Scratch file. I've actually forgotten to do that. So open up the project pane, right click, and we'll do refactor, rename file, and we'll just call it null, null.java. Okay, I'll close that down. So now we've seen the concept of null and the dreaded null pointer exception in Java. Let's now move on to our next Kotlin Foundations tutorial and see how, having introduced to the programming concept of null, which is a problem in Java, we now move on to our Kotlin Foundations tutorial on null safely in Kotlin. I've closed down all of the files and I have my project pane open. If you can right click on the Kotlin Foundations folder and do new Scratch file, full width. So in the last tutorial, we saw that in Java, when you declare a variable, if you don't assign it at the point where you declare it, then it will be null by default. Well, let's see in Kotlin what happens if you try to just declare a variable but not assign it. So we'll do var my unassigned variable, we'll make it of type string, and then we'll just do a new line. Well, straight away, this is an error. And if we hover over it, it says the property must be initialized or be abstract. And we're not going to worry about abstract for now. So straight away, Kotlin does not let you just declare a variable and then not assign it to anything. And Kotlin goes even further than that. When we declare a variable, we have to decide at the point where we declare it whether or not it can be null. So we need to say upfront if the variable is nullable or not. So let's delete this top line and let's go through this step by step. So from a blank file, we're going to make a nice clear heading for the two different types of variable. And then we'll comment every line. Okay? So this is an alternative way to do comments, and it can make default be null. So when we make a regular variable in Kotlin, unless we do something special with it, it cannot be null. Okay? Okay, we'll just undo that. So if I try and do a variable like this and not assign it, an assigned non-null variable of type string, if I try and do that, we get the warning, it must be initialized or be abstract. Okay, so we'll comment this line out, control slash command slash, which an arrow won't find it. You can't use nullable variable, a variable that can be null. So to declare that a variable can be null, we add a question mark after the type. Like will actually say what this variable is when declared. So if we want it to start off as null, like it is in Java, then we do equals null. Okay, and that's fine. We've declared a variable which is nullable, a nullable string, but Kotlin goes one step further and says, you know what? If you want it to be null straight away, you need to explicitly tell me. This is no good. So hopefully straight away you're seeing how Kotlin takes null a lot more seriously. And if we look to the right, we can see that our variable is indeed of a nullable string because we have a string with a question mark. So wherever you see a question mark after a type in Kotlin, that is saying it's a nullable type. It's a string, but it could also be null. Okay? Explicitly assign it to something, comma, including null. Okay? So you must always assign your variables. Okay? And because it's a nullable variable, because it's a type string with a question mark, we can also make it null again. No problem. So we'll put a note above this, slash, note will say, we can make a nullable variable, dot to uppercase. If you look closely, we have an error. If I hover over the red underline, only a safe or a non-null assertive call are allowed on a type nullable string, string with a question mark. So this is where things get interesting. If we scroll up to the non-null variables, we can call methods and properties and whatnot on non-null variables as normal. But when we have a variable that could be null, Kotlin has a few extra things we need to do to be absolutely sure how we access that. You can't just call a method like this on a nullable variable. So let's comment this out. And we'll say, this won't work. This is a nullable variable. And this is where Kotlin really comes into its own, and it handles what they call null safety. So let's make a few line breaks for a new section. We've covered our two types of variable, the steps when another we'll assign it, ... but this can still be null. So even though it's initially a string, it has the potential, it has the ability to be null later if we want it to be. So let's make some line breaks. I'm going to scroll down. So the first way that Kotlin handles null variables, the first tool for null safety, is what's called, we'll do // 3 stars, the safe call. Okay? I'm using these 3 stars as my mini heading. I'll do another //. So I won't do this in a comment block like above, I'll do it on individual lines. And we'll say, to call any property or method on a nullable variable, we can do a safe call. We'll do one more comment line. We'll say, we put a question mark after the variable, then we can call the method or property. So let me show you what this looks like. So I'll use my null variable, another null variable. If I just do to uppercase, you see we get the error. But if I undo that, and I put a question mark, and then do dot to uppercase, no problem. And if I look on the right, we can see we have the string, we'll assign it, but this can still be null. We have this now, so null. And when we do our null variable question mark dot to uppercase, the overall result of this is just null. So we'll put a comment above this to say what's happening here. If the variable is null, then the whole line of code will return a null value instead. Simple method do here. So because all of this whole line, and indeed all of this line, sorry, because all of this can be null, if I want to chain another method, then I must do question mark and then another dot, and then it will work. Okay? So this is a very simple but very effective way that Kotlin handles nullable variables. You can call methods and properties on them, but you must call them safely with a question mark. If it's not null, it will work as expected, but if it is null, then the whole line will just return null, and the code will not break. So that's one way of null safety, and it's worth saying the one other way that you can handle a null variable when you're using it. So do a couple of line breaks. So the other way is 3 stars, non-null assertion. So we're now stepping back into dangerous territory now, okay? So do another comment. If we are certain a variable will not be null, we can do a non-null assertion. One more comment. We put a exclamation mark, so 2 exclamation marks after the variable. Then we can call the method or property. I'll just scroll down a bit. But this is different to the question mark. This isn't saying this could be null, so try and do it if you can. This is saying, we promise you, Android Studio, we promise you, Kotlin, that this is null. We're so sure that if it's not null, you may throw a null pointer exception. Okay? Let me show you what I mean. So we'll make this variable not null now. We'll say, now it's not null. So we know it's not null, but the Kotlin compiler doesn't. As far as they're concerned, this variable can still be null. But maybe we do some clever code that will guarantee us that it will never be null. Let's do an if statement. So if this variable, now we know equals for null, but we would say it's not equal to. So exclamation mark equals, not equal to null. I think we've seen this before. So 2 equals for is equal to, and exclamation mark equals for not equal to. Okay, something new maybe that. So if this variable is not null, then the nullable variable, guaranteed to not be null, exclamation mark, we assert that this is not null, a non-null assertion, and now we can do to uppercase. So this is us in our code knowing absolutely at this point the variable cannot be null, so we can do exclamation mark, okay? But the important thing to note, and it's the final thing we'll say in this tutorial, note, we must be sure about this. If we are wrong, and it is null, this will throw a null pointer exception. And we're back into the problems of Java again, okay? Quite a few comments there. I'll just close the log pane on the right and go to full width, okay, with that icon there. So, 2 types of variable in Kotlin, non-null variable, so, 2 types of variable in Kotlin, non-null variable, where you declare the type as normal, or you can even infer the type, it will still be non-null. Okay, so non-null variables like this, and we can call methods and properties on them as normal, or nullable variables where we do a question mark. Whenever you declare a variable, you must assign it. If it starts off as null, then you must explicitly say null when you declare it. And then, if you have a nullable variable, then Kotlin has 2 mechanisms for dealing with nullable variables, 2 ways of creating null safety. There's the safe call, where you put a question mark after the nullable variable, and if it's not null, it will work as normal, and if it is null, the whole line will just resolve to null, it will just return null. Or, if in your code you are certain that it's not null, you can do a non-null assertion with 2 exclamation marks. So here we've checked that it's definitely not null, so we know at this point in the code it's not null. This is safe, okay? But we must be sure about this. I'm back inside the main activity of our project. I've closed down all of the files and the project pane. So now that we know about null, and we know about how Kotlin handles null, it's time to apply this and get a reference to all of the things that are in our layout that we need. So, looking down at the onPreviewClick method, you can see we've already got the local variable for 2 of our edit texts, the contact name and the contact number. And while it could be okay to just get all the references inside this method, inside this function, as local variables, there is one slight performance drawback to this. And that drawback is that every time the user clicks the button, it's going to perform a find view by ID for all of those elements, for all of those views. As a rule, it's pretty bad practice to find the views any more times than we need to. It should just be once, really. And we should be doing it at some point in the onCreate method. So I'm going to comment out all of the onPreviewClick code for now. So select the lines, Control/Command/. So really, we either want a local variable in here, in the onCreate method, or we want it as a class property, as a field or class variable. Okay? So thinking about it, it's going to be fine to have the button as a local variable just here, so a local val, because we set the onClick listener once and then that's done. But the rest of the code is going to be in an onPreviewClicked method, just down here. So if we were to do local variables above the button, well, they wouldn't be visible in this onPreviewClicked method. So we would want all of the other views on the screen to be a class variable at the top, like we've done before. So I'm going to go into the activity underscore main layout and just double check all the things that we need to get a reference to. So command click, control click on the actual layout here. So looking at the right, we need 1, 2, 3, 4 edit texts, or text input edit texts, content name, content number, my display name, and the available from date. We need 2 checkboxes, the junior checkbox and the immediate start checkbox, and 1 spinner, our job description, our job title spinner. We've already got the button as a local variable, which is fine. So we will declare these at the top of the class, as we've done before in Java. So if we go ahead now and actually just copy the content name edit text from here, so if you look, and select the VAL all the way up to the variable type, so Control-C, Command-C, and paste that, well, straight away we get an error. And if we hover over it, we've seen this before, property must be initialized, or be abstract. So remember, in Java, if you just did a variable but didn't assign it, it would create the variable, and then the value would be set to null. But Kotlin won't let you do that, not by default anyway. So we can't assign this yet, because with views, you can't do find view by ID before the set content view method here. So we can't assign it straight away, so it will need to be null by default. So do you remember the way that we make a variable null? We add a question mark after the type. Now that's still be no good, because if we want it to be null initially, we have to explicitly say it's null. So we do equals null, and then the error goes away. There is still one problem with this variable, and that is that we've got it as VAL for a value. a value, once assigned, can't be changed. So this variable, as it is now, would be stuck as null forever. If I try to do contact name edit text and assign it here, contact name, we get the error that says the val cannot be reassigned. So the final change is to make these proper variables var for variable. So var, and the error goes away. And also, we're getting a warning to suggest that this could be private, as it's not being used outside of this class. So we'll go ahead and let Android Studio do this error for us. I'll do Alt Enter or Option Enter, and make contact name edit text private. And that's a pretty good class variable for our view. A private var, the name of the variable, a nullable text input edit text. There's a question mark there. We initially assign it for our view. A private var, the name of the variable, a nullable text input edit text. There's a question mark there. We initially assign it to null because in Kotlin we have to. We can't do this. Okay? And then we set it later. I'm going to duplicate this 6 more times for our 7 variables that we need. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to change these variable names. So we have the contact number edit text. We have the my display name edit text. We have the start date edit text. And then we have the 2 checkboxes. We have the junior checkbox. So we need to change the type to checkbox here. Checkbox, capital B. We have the immediate start checkbox. Change the type to checkbox. And then we have the job title spinner, the drop down for our job title. And that is a spinner. Good. So we have our 7 variables that we need to be class variables that we need to be able to see in any method. And we have a button as a local variable, which is absolutely fine because we're only setting a click this and on create. That's all we're doing with the button. Now we remove the line break. And in the on create method, I will assign the fine because we're only and then we have the job of the 2 edit text. Duplicate this 6 more times for our 7 variables that we need. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'm going to change these variable names. So we have the contact number edit text. We have the my display name edit text. We have the start date edit text. And then we have the 2 checkboxes. We have the junior checkbox. So we need to change the type to checkbox here. Checkbox, capital B. We have the immediate start checkbox. Change the type to checkbox. And then we have the job title spinner, the drop down for our job title. And that is a spinner. Good. So we have our 7 variables that we need to be class variables that we need to be able to see in any method. And we have a button as a local variable, which is absolutely fine because we're only setting a click this and on create. That's all we're doing with the button. Now we remove the line break. And in the on create method, and we have a button as a local variable. Which is absolutely fine because we're only setting a click this and on create. That's all we're doing with the button. Now remove the line break. And in the on create method, I will assign those after set content view. So contact number edit text equals find view by ID, art ID edit text contact number. In fact, I'm going to duplicate this a bit quicker. So Command D or Control D, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is my display name edit text, and that is edit text my display name. The start date edit text, that's the edit text start date. Good. Then the 2 checkboxes. So we have the junior checkbox. That's our checkbox junior. The immediate start checkbox. That was checkbox immediate start. And then the job title spinner, which is our spinner job title. Good. Okay, so to recap, when you declare a variable in Kotlin, you must assign it to something, even if that something is null. So for our class properties, for our views up here, we have to do exactly this. A variable, a var, of a nullable type with a question mark, and then assign it to null. So I can now uncomment this, command slash, control slash. I can delete the two local variables. So now we're using the class properties. And we have a problem. If I hover over the red underline, only safe, that's question mark, or non-null asserted, that's two exclamation marks, only safe or non-null asserted calls are allowed. Okay, so remember, this is a nullable variable. So if we want to access this, we either do a question mark on both of them, or the two exclamation marks. So the question mark, remember, if this is null, then the whole expression, all of this, will resolve to null. And same for this. So if for any reason we made a mistake with finding our contact name edit text, then all this would be null. So that'd be null plus the comma plus null. It resolves to just being a comma. Okay, so that would be safe. If you do two exclamation marks, well, this code is now dangerous. This is a non-null assertion. We are promising Android Studio this will definitely not be null. So there's no possibility of this resolving to null now. But if we're wrong, if we forget to assign this, or we get the ID wrong and this ID isn't in our layout, then this will throw a null pointer exception. And for now, I'm going to leave the code like this with a non-null assertion, because in the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how, when we make a mistake, when something goes wrong, when our code crashes, how we can non-null assertion. ID wrong, this will definitely not be null. This will be null, so that'd be null plus the comma, or the two exclamation marks. So now we're using the class properties. And we have a problem. If I hover over the red underline, only safe. So if we want to access this, we either do a question mark on both of them, or the two exclamation marks. So the question mark, remember, if this is null, then the whole expression, all of this, will resolve to null. And same for this. So if for any reason we made a mistake with finding our contact name edit text, then all this would be null. So that'd be null plus the comma plus null. It resolves to just being a comma. Okay, so that would be safe. If we do two exclamation marks, well, this code is now dangerous. This is a non-null assertion. We are promising Android Studio this will definitely not be null. So there's no possibility of this resolving to null now. But if we're wrong, if we forget to assign this, or we get the ID wrong and this ID isn't in our layout, then this will throw a null pointer exception. And for now, I'm going to leave the code like this with a non-null assertion, because in the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how, when we make a mistake, when something goes wrong, when our code crashes, how we can see what went wrong and where it went wrong in the next tutorial, which finally talks about the Android Studio logcat.